Good evening there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls out on the internet. Welcome to the delicious recipe with the Dell. Tonight, I called this one the layered cake. An interesting sort of recipe of seeing how we are today in society, where we fit into this pyramid, and where that sort of goes from here. And the pyramid we're talking about today will be like the Illuminati period, where you have the top rank, which would be the crown, the monarchy, down to monarchy and black nobility, down to the Council of 13, the Committee of 300, and then into the different groups as we progress down and down to the bottom, where lowly people like me and the rest of the population sort of sit away from the elites and the 1%. But getting off of just that topic there for a bit there, looking back at last week's talk on what we talked about with the climate change and the propaganda of different groups, there was a part that, or a story that came up in the news there last week, if you caught it or not. I know they showed it here on the CBC News, and it was a media piece, and it was all about 11,000 scientists have all signed this petition about climate change and how brutal it was and how bad it was. And it was this big thing about 11,000 scientists. And it was done by the Alliance of World Scientists. And like I said before, is I have a real eyebrow that goes up when I hear numbers. I always, even with percentages, like I said before, there like percentages. You can only have 0 to 100%. You can't have more than 100%. Like you can't eat more than 100% of a pie. There's no more left, and there's no more. It's just there. But the way that a lot of these groups, or you would say climate groups, or people that are trying to push an agenda, they always sort of seem to fudge facts, uh, misinterpret data in a way, or cherry pick data, and cherry pick who they're they're getting their information from. So what I found was sort of interesting is that you have a national media center, news center, and I think it was also it went worldwide, but it was saying this 11,000 scientists worldwide, and they kept on repeating this fact over and over again throughout the story, that 11,000 scientists. So from this Alliance of World Scientists, they've all signed this petition that global warming is a true fact. It's carbon, and we're in a deadly cycle of no turning back on the earth. And that's it. Like I said, my eye always goes up when I hear numbers, and where are they getting these facts from, and that. So if you look at that, if the news, the main media, and this will all come back into all 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 into a ball here throughout everything, is that when you see how main media is being sort of doctored and pushing the agenda, and you see that in the states there with your the CNN and ABC, the other main news channels, and that, where they're sort of pushing sort of well, lately now I guess would be the election, and that pushing sort of certain candidates and spewing stories even in your newspapers like the New York Times and Wall Street Journal, and that, where there's agendas where they're sort of leaning left or right and pushing those sort of stories. But anyways, back anyways to this 11,000 scientists. So if the news media would have went and vetted the story and found out who this Alliance of World Scientists were, they would have noticed and would have looked at that it was a sort of a cherry picked report, but it was also out of a website that was done, that was created, called the Alliance of World Scientists. And when you look through these 11,000 names, which was sort of funny in a way, is that Not even 1% of the names were actually climate scientists or whatever. They were students, retired doctors, people in the pharmaceutical industry. Uh, some of them were just made up names like Mickey Mouse, Mr. T, and these are the names of these people. And there was a whole bunch of them, and they were all from different countries too as well. And it was really sort of amazing in a way is to see that how a main media source would take a story like that and keep on pushing this narrative that these climate scientists, this is the way the world works. Well, I guess the way the world works now is that your media, main media, is always trying to push an agenda or a story that may not actually be true. And this is sort of a classic case out of it there. And it was reported on by other online alternative news station as well. So if you want to check that out there, I think Ezra Levant off of Rebel Media, if you check that out on YouTube, I think he's like about a 26-minute uh, story on there where he goes through this whole part with this story. I saw that after I'd already gone and vetted and checked it out too as well, and then I saw it on different channels there of the alternate media. And I think that's the thing that the way a lot of uh, I guess if you say the word truthers or conspiracy theorists, and that's all getting wiped out too as well through social media with all the algorithms and stuff like that, talking about the subversive, the triangle pyramid, the laws of power that rule above us. And that'll be what we'll be getting into a little bit there today. And oh, sorry, just lost my train of thought there, guys. So, anyways, that part there with this part of this climate thing, and that's always going to be a big, huge button, and especially during election times, which is happening in the states. Like we just had our election here in Canada, and the new the prime minister Trudeau was reelected again too as well. But climate it seems to be a big, huge thing, and I just noticed there just a little while ago that our new as of November 1st here in Canada or in Ontario, our electric prices had all gone up. They actually our electric prices for off hours, mid peak, and peak hours have all doubled as of November 1st, going into winter time, which I was seeing was sort of funny. And I always sort of always wondered this part too as well. And you can agree or disagree about this. I understand all about inflation and stuff like that and how that works. But if you look back, say, like back when I was born in the 1970s, the cost of things, and this all, and if you get into the part with inflation and that, you'll understand how cost of living, all that stuff goes up. But if you sort of look at it in a way, uh, for the amount of work it was to till a field for potatoes, and you could get a bag of potatoes back then for whatever it was, 5 pound bag for $1 or something like that. Now it's like $5, like 5 times the price. I think whatever inflation goes up at 10% or 15% or something like that. I think every 10 years, uh, but or 20%, whatever it is. So anyway, so back then, 70s, 50 years ago, $1 for 5 pounds, and then nowadays, whatever, $5 now. But the amount of work that was used to till, say, that acre of property, and the amount of manpower and stuff was a lot more extensive. Now you have today with technology, you can do that amount of property for a fraction of the time for a fraction of the cost, but the potatoes cost 5 times as much as what they did before. And you'd think with technology making things simpler, easier, uh, cheaper to produce, that prices would be cheaper. They wouldn't keep on going up in expense. Now, I understand it with other things there with transportation and distribution markets that things you reach a wider vicinity or sector than from what it is here. But you'd think that with advancements that it's supposed to make things easier for us and simplified, less work, but with that, with the less work, actually things become more expensive. And it's sort of an interesting thing. And it's all comes down to this part about the money and the dollar and the control, about who's controlling what. And that's sort of a little bit of topic there that comes into this one too, with the Committee of 300 and the CFR, dealing with what was the name of that? If I look at this very quickly there on my note page here, with their book, Limits to Growth. And it was also noted about sustainability of the planet with the population and with resources. And this whole part of this pyramid, with the ruling class down to us, the low people on the totem pole or at the bottom of the pyramid, is the theory is on there is that with the pyramid, us people at the low, the big problem that is seems to be is the middle class, the people that have are in the middle. They're not the see the I guess in the part of the theory goes is that you have the upper part and the lower part. They don't want a middle part, because the middle part causes problems for the lower and the upper. And it's sort of a flux where people can start thinking and making ideas and start thinking about the upper class and about how unfair it is, and cause problems. And this is all part of many theories on what is going on in our world and our society today. So looking back, the understanding today, like I always sort of what I think, anyways, and you got to understand the past and how things have happened then to understand what is developing today and where it is going into the future. And if you look at the past, uh, say if we go through, let me see if I go through uh, our own sort of timeline. You go back to, say if I go through using sort of biblical terms or biblical part there, in the beginning there was nothing, then there was man, and then through that there was fallen angels, and fallen angels uh, came down to earth and messed with human women, created whatever the Nephilim, the giants, the different beings and entities. And this will all go into the part where people are thinking today with the real society and looking back at the past of the ancient gods, up to the part with the Tower of Babel. Anyways, so there's lots of stories in and through different religions and histories. You go into stories from the Sumerians, Mesopotamians, about what happened in the past. And that's the big thing, is that we don't have any real clear records of timelines of our past. We have whatever we have from written tablets, books that have passed down, say like as the Bible, if you can use that as a part of history. I know that you have certain people, whatever, being atheists, don't believe in the Bible, or different religions don't believe in that, and or they do. But there's also similarities that go in through different societies all throughout the world. So one part of this theory that goes on is that there was back in the past, and this is all to get to where we are today with this pyramid structure, with as I said, with the monarchy, different royal families, the black nobility, which is dealing with other royal families, and then the separation through the 13 families, and then the 13 separations through those, then to the Committee of 300, then to if I went into the other part of it, what I had was the CFR, the United Nations, the Bilderberg Group, the Club of Rome, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and the Trilateral Commission. And all this part there with bringing in this whole one government, one ruling class, one religion, new world order. And that's sort of been a topic that has been sort of tossed around through even presidents like Bush. I remember even having one of his speeches there talking about a new world order, bringing in this one government to control basically the planet, the world. And that it'll all come into this part here of this pyramid and this hierarchy schedule that works from the very rich, the 1% of the 1%, which is the part of the Council of 13, and all this stuff goes back to Britain's empiric rule with the East India Company with the 13 families, and those 13 families, if I can remember where I written those down here on the other page here, were called what actually called the Crown Council of 13 back in the 1600s and beforehand there, and they were families. They had a name, their name back then, but also their name has changed into today's, and you'll see some of them have stayed the same, some of them have altered a little bit. But you have names out of the Council of 13. You have like the Rothschilds, still the Rothschilds, the Bruce family, which become the Bundy family, the Cavendish family, which become the Kennedys, the Medici family, which become the DuPonts, and you'll see a lot of these families there, what sort of businesses they control and run globally, uh, locally, and their involvement in politics, geopolitics, and finance, banking, uh, world world stuff, and it all trickles down their control into all different matters of media of control. And also I'll keep on going over the Hanover family with the Freeman family, the Habsburgs, the Collins, Krupps that became the Lee and the Slim, the Plantagenet, the Onassis family, the Rockefellers stayed the Rockefellers, the Romanoffs became the Astors, the Sinclairs or the St. Clairs became the Russells, the Warburg or the DeBanco became the Van Dun, the Windsor, Saxe Coburg Goth became the Merovingian European dynasty. So those were like the 13 Crown Council. And back into the 1600s with the East India Company, and you got to figure this back then. A lot of uh, the monarchies that were back beforehand were running most of all the well, they were the controlling factors of the of the countries of the states, and running textiles, spices, drugs, opium, which is all big money making things, and control that. And that's where a lot of their power came from. And you'll see where it all they maintain power, but these 13 they have the world banks, they have the major industry or control of the major industry. They have the 1% of 1% are like they're up in the billions, the $1 trillion range of assets. And like even with the Queen there, Queen, even though that she doesn't have that much power as per se into the British uh, parliamental system, is still a factor in there too as well. But she does own a lot of wealth, and she still owns a lot of land, and which she is paid for every year. And there's a lot of stuff, a lot of money, a lot of property. Where basically, like even here in Canada, all our government land is all called Crown land. That's all the Queen's land, and even in Australia, other countries. I think it's like 52 countries, I think, make up the Commonwealth, and they're all paid tribute to the royal family every year, and they own properties, shorelines, and that's all rental stuff. That's all given back. So they're always making money. They always have control. They're involved in the lower steps of the pyramid, into the UN and different groups, the Committee of 300. Uh, you'll see where these all trickle down and how they all spread out. And so for us at the very bottom of the totem pole, looking up to this spire or this web or this many layered cake above us, you sort of see and you go, wow, our little problems that we have here to what is being controlled. Like you figure a lot of our taxation and stuff like that and government spending that happens there, like even with the environmental tax credit, I think we have a tax credit here, the global carbon tax credit, but you're also being taxed on a lot of environmental things that it's all on off of government spending, and as then your cost of living goes up, things go become more increasing, and it's all based off of this dollar that was created. Oh, geez, and go into a lot there off of the gold standard, the Federal Reserve Bank. Uh, there's lots of different spider webs this thing goes off of. So, anyways, so going back to the story there back before. Uh, so, uh, part of these theories there is that a lot of these this hierarchy is dealing with, and well, after the one part there is off of this sort of this Draco or Pindar, and which is also known as the dragon or the devil penis, the top of the eye of the pyramid, and then below that you have the different monarchies and the black nobility. And the part of the black nobility, and you'll see where these names of these houses come down from the black nobility into the Council of 13. You have the Hanovers from Germany, Habsburgs from Austria, the Orange from the Netherlands, the Liechtensteins from Liechtenstein, and the Guelph family from the House of Guelph from Britain. And then you'll see them when they come down, also how they came down into the Council of 13, where you'll see different names. So out of this hierarchy, as the theory goes, um, you have the top that goes down to the bottom, and as it spreads out wider, each of these families have a little bit more. So you have the Council of 13, and those Council of 13 have 13 other subsets out of that, which trickle down into this other group, which I had right here. Sorry for um, into the round table, which build into the CFR, the Council of Foreign Relations, the United Nations, the Bilderberg Group, the Club of Rome, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and the Trilateral Commission. And these are think tanks, and which do advise the rest of the world in policy, like you have from the UN. You have that policy of the Agenda 2030, which was to make life sustainable, to erase poverty, increase natural resources, to make a green planet, to deal with this topic of global warming. And this seems to be a very hot topic about global warming, and a lot of parts that I've been looking into, because like I said before there last week there, I did go to college, and I did study environmental engineering, and I'm always sort of like I said, I'm skeptical when people use numbers and people use facts, and where they derive their information from the facts that they have to make their claim or statement. And so when when you have different agencies or different groups that are taking facts from a very small data set from very limited, I guess, observational trackers like NOAA or NASA, that can't be verified. There's other independents that have gone out and have done similar studies away from these government agencies that have been doing their studies. And it's been shown there is that some of these government agencies have fudge numbers, have altered data in a way to, um, how would you say this, to promote a situation that might not necessarily be true, to get a sort of a mindset to a way of thinking. Now, there was a guy back in the early 1900s, and I'll see if I have his name here correct, as I hope I do. And just hold on for a second here. I'm sort of all over the place there today. And where was I here? Oh yeah, Edward Bernays. Now, if you're not sure about who Edward Bernays was, uh, he was a guy that uh, did a part about. He was the nephew of Freud, but he had also he'd read this book called The Crowd, and he'd studied him by Gustave Le Bon, and it goes into this part about controlling uh, the classes or the lower classes from the elite. See, the elite want to maintain power, and if you figure yourself, say, I played this game there with one of my friends there, and if you ever remember the game Risk, and it's all about world domination and what you can do. And there's other games called World Domination and different things you would do to maintain power. And what would you do? How would you do this? And so you'd have to sort of look at this in a way, is that the ruling class want to maintain what they have. And if you look back through historical records, through family trees, and how royal families and maintain their wealth, is it's been well known as there's been a lot of intermarriage in between the same family and with other royal families to maintain this hierarchy that's uh, that's happened. And if you look back in family trees where they've all married into, then married back to maintain what they call the royal bloodlines or the family bloodlines. And you see this also too as well in with the Vatican too. With there's a bunch of families that that created most of all the popes through history, and these there's 13 papal bloodlines that are as well. It seems to be this part with this 13, and I'll just give you what these 13 bloodlines were, families that were part of the Vatican bloodlines. You had the Farnese, uh, uh, the Borgia, the Orsini, the Aldobrandini, the Conti, the Colonia, the Medici, the Pamphili, the Chigi, the Samagili, the Pallavicini, the Breakspear, and the Este. And a lot of these families are wealthy families. Control. I think there's a part of there with controlling with the textiles back in the early parts of the centuries, back beforehand through history, and the whole thing of creating money and wealth so they could spread uh, the Catholicism or the Christianity throughout the world and have control. And if you look through parts of history, that even with when you had monarchy or kings, queens, whatever, that were ruling class, that were ruling things, there was always a part of some sort of religion or some sort of spiritual accompaniment uh, along with that ruling class. And this goes back to way back in history where I sort of got sidetracked. See, this is the fun thing about conspiracy and theory and looking back. Looking back into the past, we can guess and surmise and take from what we do, from what we have from historical records. What is available? A lot of history is hidden. See, I'm going to go off another tangent here. Is that you look at what's being held at Smithsonian, the British Royal Museum. Every country has a museum, and with any new archaeological find that happens, is usually the country where it's found. Is the country comes in and once it's been noted that there's been some sort of ancient find, it's stopped and it's the historical society comes in, archaeologists, and they're the ones that determine whether it'll be revealed. And you'll see that happen a lot, even in Egypt with new finds. You'll have archaeological people, not companies or groups, will go over there and they'll find something new, and then Egypt's historical society will come in and they'll stop dig or take it over, and they will go through and see what will be released or see what is stopped. Like even in Egypt there today, there's lots of areas what can't be explored, can't be looked at. Areas are blocked off. A lot of stuff that's been found has been carried away or hidden away. Some stuff beforehand had been stolen, and uh, a lot of stuff, a lot of hidden history, a lot of stuff that could change our view of what actually happened in the past has sort of been, well, in my mind, anyways, has sort of been hidden away. Even look at the Vatican vaults, and to get any information, you just can't go into the Vatican vault. There's like a history of many books, and it's all locked away. And the only way to view anything is you have to apply for an order, has to be approved by the Pope, but you also have to know what you're asking for. You just can't go in there and go and peruse the hundreds of thousands of volumes of books, scrolls, and texts that are down there, and artifacts. Those aren't available. You have to make a request for something that you believe down there, and if it gets approved, and then you're given access to view that one item, but you can't view anything else. And it even goes even with the British Museum. I was watching an interesting documentary on that, and they have hundreds of thousands or thousands of not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of cuneiform tablets and other tablets that are stored in warehouses that haven't even been cataloged or gone through. And you got to figure, in today's technology today, is that it could easily just be laser scanned and then brought up, and then people could study it. But no, that's all being held back because they haven't gone through to see the importance of it and what it says. And so what you have through our limited history that hasn't been controlled by a controlling power is the stuff that's been stolen or leaked out, and that's where you get some of our history, or some of the history we have is the stuff that is painted onto or chiseled into stone that we today cannot move, and it can't be hidden. It can be access to it can be stopped, but most of the time, whatever, like you have the things there in South America with the ancient temples there, which sort of resemble the ancient temples in Egypt and in India and in other places around the world. So, as I went off the topic again, uh, going back to this part with where this comes into is that in the story back in Genesis, is that there was these fallen angels that disagreed with what was going on, and they had left after Lucifer had been cast out, and they had come down to earth, and they had uh, found that they wanted to mate with women, and with that became the part with the Nephilim, or the giants. But also when they came down, so the story the story goes, and these, what they were called, the flying angels, or the fallen ones, and you'll see this in other texts too as well, in other religions, talk about these visitors from elsewhere, and you'll get them in creation stories and old myth there in different parts around the world, not connected to. You'll see it in South America, you'll see it in Tibet, China, you'll see it in India, and this whole part there, they taught humans the part of mining, uh, metalwork, uh, esoteric knowledge, plants, mysticism, esoteric knowledge of the you got astrology, astronomy, tarot cards, gematria. It was all things to do away from, uh, I guess you'd say, God, to make man uh, self-sufficient and to understand the universe as to be their own controlling force instead of, so the story goes, instead of looking at the Father, the capital G God of the universe and creation. And so with these, uh, you would say, fallen angels and then their offspring. And this is where you get into these stories and texts about Gilgamesh, where you had on these tablets and different demons, angels, spirits, jinn, fairy folk. You have it in the Norse mythology with Odin, Thor, Loki, these small g gods. So they were, I guess, present pre-flood and the knowledge after flood too as well. Whatever sort of survived or managed to persist in the knowledge. And this whole part of magic and mysticism and everything that goes through that, it was all working hand in hand with the ruling class. And you'll see through the stories through history, like I said before, you always had a powerful king or a powerful, uh, well, it was mostly men, or with the queen. Uh, and sometimes there was queens that ruled as well, but they always had some sort of religious or mystical uh, faction that was always with them advising. You'd see it in old stories with the oracle, uh, people that were dealing with mysteries of the universe and magic, and you'll see it in with the story of with Merlin and King Arthur, and different parts of history. You'll have these sort of stories. You'll have like the fairy folk in Ireland, and then you have over in South America, you have the snake gods, and this whole part goes into this part with this reptilian and into this part of this triangle as we slowly go back to this point again. Uh, so, anyways, with this part, when you have, so we went down the part of the pyramid, you had the monarchy, the Black Council, Council of 13, or they're called the Crown Council, the Committee of 300. And people on this Committee of 300, if I have to find this here there very quickly, the B, uh, you have wealthy families as well. Now, these are part of the 1%, but they're not the 1% of the 1%. Those were in the Council of 13 and the ruling monarchy class and black nobility. You have the oligarchs like Roman Abramovich. You got any royalty like Andrew, Duke of York, Beatrice, Queen of the Netherlands. Um, you have people on the Committee of 300. You have like Steve Ballmer, the owner of the LA Clippers, Tony Blair and Bill Gates, George Bush, Warren Buffett, Bill Clinton, various Rothschilds, Queen Elizabeth, Al Gore, Alan Greenspan, people like before, like Mikhail Gorbachev, Rockefellers, and the popes were also in there as well. So these part of these Committee of 300, this is an upper ruling class, and what they want to do is what suppose the theory is out of this is that they want to eliminate the middle class and control pretty much everything there. If I miss my notes here, sorry, I'm a little bit discombobulated here today. Uh, so what they have there is control of military, technology, media, and it's the control of information and knowledge. It figures that beside and the financial. And so you have the families like you've known about before, the Rothschilds, and how their influence and part with the World Bank and money. And you have here, like even with or in North America, you have whatever the Federal Reserve, which is sort of a separate entity from the rest of the U.S. Same as so as Washington D.C. is a separate. The District of Columbia is a separate entity from the United States. Same as Vatican City is not part of Rome. It's its own separate entity, and same with the British monarchy. I think whatever is that is a separate entity itself to England, which also makes up a part of a controlling class privilege. You have a hierarchy of a crown, you have a religious factor, a military factor, and a bank. And you have that with these three different parts of this triangle here with the Queen, the Pope, and the US. Uh, Washington, D.C., with the military power. And this all goes into this part with this, the theory goes with this New World Order and control of the masses. So out of this committee of 300, going back into this part again. So you have the major industry that is directing technology, military aids, military weapons. And even though all these different people that are a part of this group of 300, they, even though they do have different plans and stuff, they all are still part of the same thing. They're all part of the same goal, which breaks it down into the lower parts of the pyramid where you have these think tank groups, which were before uh, think tanks and other organizations like I said, the Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, CFR, and these trickle down into the part where you have into government leaders. Now, if you see there in the Committee of 300, you'll have Republicans and Democrats here in the U.S. or other opposing parties, but they still are part of the same group. And as the theory goes there, it doesn't matter who's in power, whoever it is, like as you have there now, Donald Trump trying to be impeached by one power, by the other party there, but you'll know, you'll see that's all just puppetry there for the masses to be involved in. The real stuff that's going on is the people that you don't know what's going on, the stuff that's behind the scenes, and it's the control of the world flow, the market, everything. All these different people, these elite people there, all have control of global business and finance. And even though that they may be fighting, and it's just all the big stage show, as the theory goes, or however you want to say it there, just to keep us in the middle here, just wondering what's going on. That's a part of my, I think, also part of my theory in a way too, as well, is you get into this whole thing about wag the dog magic, misdirection, and you've seen that happen even in 2019 with events that happen in North America, where somebody will be indicted with something and then another story will pop up somewhere else, and that part gets sort of sloughed off underneath the news media. The news goes and talks about something else to sort of not dissuade or distract what is actually really going on. Like you even see with here with the part with the Jeffrey Epstein stuff and the people involved in that. Now, do you think the Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton will ever be indicted or looked into any more than what they have been? No, because what? Bill Clinton's on the Committee of 300. They're connected to higher up families, higher parts of organizations. Even with Hillary Clinton talking about the CFR, she was so glad that it would be close to Washington, D.C., their new building, because with those people, they're getting information from these people to run the rest of us lowly people down in the bottom. If you see the connections and how this spider web of layering goes, and there's a difference whether you whatever you like or dislike David Icke, but he talks also about this spider web, and they talk about this dark cabal. dark uh, Luciferian satanistic dark esoteric magic society, and how a lot of these groups use these sort of old practices. This gets back to the part here of the fallen angels and the separation uh, after the Tower of Babel, when that went down and the tribes were scattered across the earth. They maintained this stuff from the fallen angels and learned about this magic, the vril, which is called, or the chi, and dealt with these beings and their offspring that were here on earth. And so now this is where it gets all a little bit crazy, and I'm not sure if I really follow this part at all. But I've done a little bit of a study into this. But when you get into these upper class, ruling class societies, and where they break off into different smaller groups, which are all connected, they all see, and then it also into the secret societies, the Skull and Bones, uh, Freemasonry. There's been talk about that, Templars, even stuff that's happened in with the Black Church, the Black Cube of Saturn worship, uh, the Black Sun down there, the Vril, Chi, dark mysticism, uh, a lot of ceremony and we say worship to these fallen gods, or small g gods, that were once here, as the story goes, on earth back during the part of the fallen angel time, uh, working forward. So a lot of this knowledge, even with the Gnostic knowledge, where they went into with dealing with magic symbols and spells, you have which are written, I guess, in the Lesser and Greater Keys of Solomon, and into the books, the Apocrypha. They talk about it in the Book of Enoch, about what was here on Earth. Whether you wish to believe it or not, it's up to you. But you can research into all these different things, and you'll see where a lot of these stories of the past are maintained and have come full path up to here into present time and to work into the future. Now, I was just going into this whole part about the real society, and this other part of the, if I can find my notes here, of the Athun, let's see, uh, an Anubis site, or Ath Athnubi Society. Oh, geez, it's all part of this part with dealt with in the 1900s with Hitler and the Nazis and the Real Society and the Thun Society, and what they were really after. And even with there was talk too about Saddam Hussein was searching through the deserts there, looking for Babylon, to try and uncover that. So with this society there, with which would with this real society, what they were looking for were ancient esoteric knowledges of the old ancient past. And as the story goes, they were searching for certain items that were written about in the Bible and other ancient religious texts. You're looking at the spear of destiny, and these are things that have been talked about in movies. Looking for the Ark of the Covenant, that was in Raiders of the Lost Ark, but they were also looking for uh, ancient technology of the gods, the Nordics, with Odin and Thor, the hammer, all these things that were all written about, that they thought or believed were true. And they thought there anyways is that there was this, you got into this whole part with the Aryan race and with the Nordic race, to create superhuman super giants, and to use this real energy from uh, the black sun, which is supposed to come from the center of the earth, from the Draco Empire. And this is where you get into this part with this reptilians and the top of the pyramid with the Draco or Pindar, which has also been named to, or the pinnacle or the dragon's penis. And that's where the whole part of this serpent mythology of the reptile sort of plays into it. Like there's this rabbit hole and many layers of this cake go in many different directions. Whether it's all true, whether it's somewhat true, or whether it's not true at all, or maybe it's a mixture of all of the above. We don't know, but there are societies and groups and people that are dabbling in and do believe this and are trying to summon dark forces or use these real or chief forces. And what I've seen out of there is that this force can be used for good or evil, but usually out of it is that with power comes corruption, power comes control, power comes uh, you want to maintain your position. And so if you're part of the 1% or 1% of the 1% or the 1% or the wealthy elites, you don't want to ever drop down to be down here with us little guys down here at the bottom of the pyramid, where you always want to maintain up at the top. And that's why you'll see with a lot of parts through history and with genealogy and family trees of these rich and powerful families, even a lot of these families that I named off out of here out of the Council of 13 and 300 and stuff like that, you'll see like the Kennedy Onassis connection. You'll see families in the royal family that marry in between their own houses or other houses of royalty to keep that, as you'd say, the blue bloods, the power in that, to keep the wealth and the money and control in these high families. And it even happened even with the 13 families, the papal bloodlines there. They all intermarried with each other to maintain control, money, wealth. They never ever want to be down below. And you'll see too is that even with these people, even on the Council of 300 and with these big huge banks, where banks have lost millions, billions of dollars, and they'll be bailed out. Whereas like us, the lowly part there, you go bankrupt, you're bankrupt, you don't get bailed out. Oh well, you lost $500 million. Oh well, that's all paid off to the money, and that's all credit fine. See, the elites take care of the elites, and even though they do disagree and they do fight for hierarchy and levels into power to go up and down, but they all still are working for the same sort of common goal, is to keep the upper at the upper and the lower at the lower. And you'll see Hollywood is also mentioned sort of different movies have come out about this, like Asylum, where the leader at the top and the people at the bottom just do the scraps. And that was the whole part of this council of, or the committee of 300, even with the CFR and their book about maintaining how to maintain the global dynamic and to eliminate the middle class. Because as I said before, the middle class has time to think and to analyze the situation, what's going on, to move from that middle class to upper class. The upper class does not want any more people in that upper class. They want to maintain where they are. And this is how the sort of the story goes down the pyramid. So you have a top, and you'll see a lot of people, they'll give you this little symbol, the little triangle, the pyramid stuff. And it's a big, huge part there with the all-seeing eye, all this symbology. A lot of this stuff is just deflection and to cause uh, a sort of a disturbance in what is actually really going on. So people just slough it off. And you have these terms that have been used like Illuminati. Well, yeah, it's been out there. Cabal, the dark or uh, not the deep web, or the, oh geez, I'm gonna brain fart here on this Remembrance Day. Uh, you have the whole part is, I guess the part here is that there's a lot of stuff that's going on behind the pictures, and a lot of part with the media is not telling you what's going on because they are controlled by these people that of the committee of 300 and the wealthy elite to maintain a sort of a narrative to keep the low people on the totem pole or at the bottom of the pyramid in the dark about what's really going on. And as you say, the middle class don't really move up from the middle class. They go up a very small percentage, actually make it and do go up, but mostly they stay middle or they go down to zero. And there's such a a hard time to move anywhere in that sort of that middle area that you're stuck with this part of working where you're working all the time, you're making enough to make ends meet, you're not saving anything, you don't own anything like your property, like you don't own period. You own your house, but you don't make any payments on your house. Your bank takes your house, you don't own a house anymore. You never own the property that you live on. It's all just rented. You're just renting with this illusion of ownership. You own your car until you pay it off, or if you're leasing it, if you don't make your payments, your car is gone. They take your car, take everything. You rent, you're paying for services. You don't own electricity unless you're using you pay for and you have solar electricity. And as a part is that uh to maintain, like even with electricity, that's even how, like I mentioned, how they've sort of jacked up prices coming into wintertime. This is all part of this, I guess you'd say, in a way, this sort of this control system to control the middle, to move them down to lower and lower down the totem pole or down the pyramid to maintain the power structure. And if you get into the whole part is, maybe we'll get into one of these days there, if I'm able to get this guest there, that we'll talk about this part and how this works into this esoteric magic, and with this sort of this real society that was dealt with even in the 1900s there with the Hitler and the SS, where they were out searching for, like as I said before, these powers uh, to take over the world. And this gets all into the part about the bell and hidden UFOs and what might have happened in Antarctica and in South America after the war, the part of where the Operation Paperclip had come and to take knowledge from over in Germany into the US to create NASA, to create the rockets and this whole part of this space thing. But that's a story for another day. And I know it's sort of a little bit of a cluster mess here in this part here, but basically, out of the part, you have the pyramid, upper class down to lower class, and me here on this phone in my lowly middle to lower class station in life as it is right now. I bid you all farewell on this Monday night, November 11th, Remembrance Day, and I will talk to you again next week. Thank you very much.